Hi, it's Rob from the Bush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint a Nighthaunt Glaivewraith. The first colour we're going to work with is Citadel Mechicus Standard Grey. I'm just going to use this to paint the gravestone. I chose this one because I love the base that it's on. The base was painted up for a tutorial last week. And also love the way it's kind of passing through the gravestone, so you've got those ethereal parts coming either side of it. There's plenty of great details on that gravestone as well. So I thought this one would be quite a good one to paint up because you get a little bit of basing kind of stuff on it as well as the actual Glaivewraith itself. So give that a nice smooth coat of Mechicus Standard Grey and on to the next colour. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Black. As always, any black will do it. So if you've got Citadel Black or an Army Painter Black, you'll be using that to do the cloth on the top. It's kind of robe or shawl, whatever you'd call it. It's more draped over than being worn. Give that a nice smooth coat of black. Once that's on, we can move on to the next colour. Now I'm going to use calf flesh just to do the bone on the model. So you've got the skull on the Glaivewraith itself, and there's also a skull down the bottom of the gravestone. So you want to give both of those a nice smooth coat of Citadel Rakarth flesh. Like so. Okay, so this next part we're going to be using three colours. We're going to be using Citadel Technical Nighthaunt Gloom, Citadel Technical Nihilakh Oxide, and also black. For this we're using Vallejo Black. What we're going to be doing is doing a little bit of almost like wet blending on the miniature. So we're putting on the Nighthaunt Gloom first, and once you've got that on, you want to be getting a little bit of the Nihilakh Oxide and kind of blending that into the bottom of it. And then you're going to be getting a little bit of black on the brush and mixing that into the Nighthaunt Gloom at the top there and kind of blending that in. Now when you start doing this, it looks really messy, so what you want to be trying to aim for is getting the lighter parts of it where you've got more Nighthaunt Gloom and more Nihilakh Oxide on the raised areas of the cloth, while the darker areas with more black mixing with the Nighthaunt Gloom is going into the recesses where those creases are in the material. Now I'll put this on as an extra long part because it does take quite a while. The end results you'll see in the next part of the video look a lot better than they do at the moment because I'm still blending that in there. But it's probably the easiest method I've found to do this. I've had to play around trying to do a few different ones. This is how I'll be doing my Glaivewraiths. So once we come back to that, we do all the highlights and do the white of the etherealness coming across the Nihilakh Oxide and blending that all in together. It looks fine. It does look a bit dodgy at the moment, so bear with that. If you just keep working in the black into the Nighthaunt Gloom and working the Nighthaunt Gloom into the Nihilakh Oxide, you'll get it good to go. I had an image of one of the Games Workshop Glaivewraiths open while I was painting this up, just to see where all the razors were and where the highlights went in terms of on the razors in the cloth, the creases, and where the darker areas were. So if you are painting it, it's worth having one of the images up just so you can see the kind of effect that you're going for. Now we're going to be using Citadel Leadbelcher, and that is just going to be to do the blade of this miniature. Now so far this is the rarest of the ones that I've seen. It's got no chains or no bits dangling from it. They paint silver as well. So this is the only metallic that you have on the whole of the miniature. Paint it up like so. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo beige brown. Now I like this because it's very much like a light wood effect that I can get going with the beige brown, but any kind of similar colour will do. If you're looking at the Citadel range, I haven't got one similar myself, but it's lighter than Mournfang brown. It's definitely darker than Karak stone as well. Just looking at the different colours that I've got there. So if you've got a similar shade of Citadel or Army Painter, I'm sure that'll work just as well. I'm going to use a little bit of Nurgling green. We're going to use that to paint up the little vines which are growing up the back of the gravestone here. So just give that a nice smooth coat of Nurgling green. We're going to leave the roses to do in another colour. And when I'm painting this up here, I do miss off the leaves which are coming out behind the roses. I didn't actually realise they were leaves initially. So when you come to paint it up, do paint the leaves with this colour as well. Next up, I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Xerius purple. I'm going to use that just to paint the roses. As I did with the Nighthaunt, or the chain rasps I should say, I painted up little kind of ghostly purple bits coming out the bases. And so I want to have a kind of purple theme going through the army of something purple on most of them, just to sort of tie them all in together. So I'm going for the roses, so any of the models that have got roses on them, there's going to be purple roses. Any with little extra bits of kind of mist are going to have a purple hint to them. I'm going to start with the shades and use Citadel Nuln Oil. All you're going to do is give a nice coat of that to the Leadbelcher on the front of his glaive there. Next up is Citadel Agrax Earthshade. We're going to use this on the haft of the glaive. Like so. Now we're moving on to Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade. Like we did with the bases for the Nighthaunts, we're going to be shading these with the blue just to give it a slightly different hint of colour than to the normal grey that we've been using on the Stormcast. I have to forgive my yellow film. I was doing some spraying in the yard the other day and didn't wear my glove. So it's mostly come off now, but there are still a few little bits left on. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Druchii Violet. Again, third time this video I've failed to show the paint, or the shade in this case. So Citadel Druchii Violet, just to do those two roses. And now to shade the vines, the bush, we're going to do Citadel Athonian Camo Shade. Next up is Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I'm going to be using this to do the Glaivewraith's face, the spines on its back, and also the skull at the base of the gravestone. That does have some nice little details on the skull there, like little ridges and stuff like that, so make sure you get the sepia in those recesses, just so it brings out the details there. Now we're going to use Vallejo White. Again, as usual, any white will do. You're just going to start reapplying the white to these ethereal parts, the little floaty bits coming out the back of the Glaivewraith. Now the light does pick up the white and make it quite brilliant when you're doing this, so it does make a kind of gleam. But you want to be doing the raised areas of the ethereal stuff, so you're leaving the Nihilakh oxide in the recesses and any parts that, I say this, wouldn't be catching the light, but that's how I've been painting on the white again. Next up, we're using a little bit of Citadel Palid witch flesh. We're just going to add some of this to the larger areas of white. Give that a slightly different colour. So any areas where you've got quite a large patch of white on it, you want to be adding some of this Palid witch flesh just to break it up. Give it a slight discoloration so it's not quite as bright and gleaming as it would be. Alright, we're using Palid witch flesh again here. I'm just going to use this to paint the hands of the Glaivewraith. Now we're only going to do one layer because it is kind of ghostly, so they've had Nihilakh oxide on already. And we're just adding the details on with the Palid witch flesh, just trying to make them a little bit creepy and discoloured. Next up, we're going back to the bones. We're going to be using Citadel Leadbelcher flesh. You want to be making sure you're leaving the Seraphim Sepia in the recesses and highlighting it so that the areas that be catching the most light get the most Leadbelcher flesh. Now we've mixed in some Citadel Ushabti bone to the Leadbelcher flesh. We're now going to do the first highlight. So you want to be looking at doing the upper edges of most areas. Any flat bits you want to be giving a reasonable coat of this, but making sure that you do leave some Leadbelcher flesh around the areas with the recesses in. Like so. Now we're adding a little bit of Vallejo White to the previous mix, and we're just going to do one final highlight on the bone. So you want to be doing the sort of like upper edges of the eye socket, and then the top of the lower edge of the eye socket, and just catching around any details and ridges just to bring out them, make them show up a lot more. Like so. Next is Vallejo Beige Brown. I'm going to start reapplying the colour to the haft of the glaive. Now the areas where you've got patches of quite a lot of Graxair shade there, you want to be sort of working around them. They're like grooves in the haft and they probably catch a little bit more dirt and grubbiness. So leave those, that makes them stand out. You can add a little bit of the brown to them, but you want to leave some big patches of the shade there. You want to be making sure you get all the edges and ridges in the wood as well. Now that you've done that, you're going to mix a little bit of Citadel Leadbelcher flesh with the beige brown. You're just going to add highlights to those bits and also do some striations in the wood, so some left to right, or or top to bottom depending on which way the glaive is, but some lengthways striations in the wood. Like so. Now I'm going to start working on the ethereal parts again using Citadel Ahriman Blue and mixing it with a little bit of the Nihilakh Oxide to blend it in. You just want to be doing these ridges, the very top parts of them, to bring out the details with Ahriman Blue and a little mix of Nihilakh Oxide just to thin it and lighten it as well, so it blends in with the Nihilakh Oxide further down. The further away it gets from the Nihilakh Oxide further down, the darker you really want it to be. So if you finished it, just add an extra layer to get a bit more colour there. Now I'm going to reapply the black to his cloak because that's worn away a little bit. It's not a very good coating, so it's entirely down to me handling the figure and holding him by the cloak while I was painting him. So this is a good example of why you should use some sort of painting handle when you're doing your models, just to save you rubbing off all of the colour. Like so. I'm going to start highlighting the cloak with Vallejo German Grey. You want to be catching all the areas that be getting light, so the top of it, the kind of shoulders, the elbows, the tops of the creases, any of the flat areas that are sticking out quite a bit or on the top surfaces. And around the spiny bits on the back as well, I'm going to be sort of working that so there's a little bit of darkness around each spine because there's a little recess there. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Mechicus Standard Grey. I'm going to use this to pick out all the ridges and the tops of the creases. And just any of the nice little details that you want to stand out there. Good thing about these is there is loads of detail on them and the cloaks look really good the way they've got the creases. Very well thought out model. There's one of the cats again. It's the other one, not the one that was sitting at the back of the video the other week. But I was midway through filming and there's no way I could do it again. So now I'm going to use a little bit more Mechicus Standard Grey and start working on gravestone. Now with this you don't want to be doing a 100% smooth coat. You kind of want to be feathering it and maybe stippling it on a little bit just so that you get an uneven grey to it. You don't want it to be completely smooth because you want the stone to have that kind of almost mottled look to it. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Dawnstone. I'm going to use that to do the first highlights on the gravestones. So I'm going around all the edges first and then I'm going to start spreading out the Dawnstone from the edges into the stone itself. Like so. Now I'm going to use some Vallejo White. I'm going to use this to highlight the gravestone, do an extreme highlight so catch the edges, just to make them stand out quite a lot. So I'm going to be getting the bottom edges of any cracks or the top edges of any ridges. just so it looks like the light's coming down from above and they're catching onto the stone. Now we're going to start working on the blade. We're going to start with some Citadel Leadbelcher shade. I'm just going to grime up the area around where it joins onto the haft, and then give the actual blade itself some discolorations. Just do that off shot so you can't see it. Like so. You want to be adding it along the blade, leaving little areas clear so you've still got some of the Leadbelcher showing through. Like so. Now that you've done that, you want to use some Citadel Seraphim Sepia. You want to make sure the Leadbelcher shade is completely dry before you do this. And then you want to be adding the Seraphim Sepia to the areas which are thickest with the Leadbelcher shade. So always make sure the previous shade is dry, because otherwise when you add this and start spreading it around, it'll take off any damp areas of the previous colour and leave you with a horrible ridge that you can't get rid of very easy. With that done, we're now going to use a little bit of Citadel Necron compound just to dry brush some silver onto the edges, make them stand out a little bit more. Like so. Now we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome. I'm just going to use this to give the blade a sharpened edge. Just really carefully want to paint along the very, very tip of that edge to make it look like it's been used and it's been sharpened a little. You also want to do a few little scrapes and scratches on it, as though another blade's caught it and left a clean streak through the metal. And the final thing we're going to do is use a little bit of the Citadel dry paint, Rise of Rust. Slightly out of focus there, sorry. We're just going to add that to the blade. Just gently add that on to this colour to make it have that rusted, unmaintained look about it. Once you've done that, it is on to the next colour. Now we're going to return to the Citadel Nurgling Green. With the shade added, you're just going to use this to highlight the vines or the plant. You just want to be trying to do the top edges where it catches the light, and a few little lines and details on the leaves and the upper parts of the vines too. Now going on to Citadel Genestealer Purple, I'm going to do the first highlight on the roses. So you want to do about maybe 50 to 30% of each part of it with the Genestealer Purple to give that a nice lighter look. Like so. And then we want to be using a little tiny bit of Citadel Emperor's Children just to do edge highlights on the rose, just to bring out all the little details on the petals. Like so. One of the final things to do is Citadel Leadbelcher shade. I'm going to use this to weather the gravestone a little bit. So you just want to be spreading that along the bottom edge of the gravestone and in any of the larger recesses that will be catching dirt and grime as it's lying there untouched. And next up we want to be using some Citadel Athonian Camo shade, just to do that to a slightly greater extent. So you want to raise the green slightly further up than you did the brown. You can go over the Leadbelcher shade, that's fine to do. And then using it in the same kind of places, so on edges where damp is going to stay for a lot longer, you want to make sure that you've got like slight bits of the green on there. So on top of the little ridges, on the stones, on top of the hourglass there, and so on. And that is the finished Glaivewraith. Is there anything I've covered in here that you'd like to see in more detail? Just shout out and I can do a short video of that. But thanks for watching this far. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.